Today we're continuing down the race car rabbit hole by converting my 350Z drift car to run manual brakes. Now before I explain what manual brakes are, it's important you understand what a normal car comes with, and that is boosted brakes. Usually there's a big flat black cylinder that sits behind your master cylinder, something along these lines. And what that does is it takes vacuum from the engine and applies it to that big cylinder diaphragm thing, and it makes the brakes work with less force from the driver because it's using the assistance of vacuum from the engine. It works fine, and on a regular street car it's absolutely perfect, no problems. But when you put it in a race car setting, what it does is it gives you inconsistent braking, because depending on how much vacuum the engine's pulling will change the feel of the brake pedal. And where it becomes really obvious is when you're really demanding a lot of the brakes. So let's say the last 15 to 20% of brake pedal engagement is going to change a lot dependent on how much vacuum the engine's pulling and that diaphragm thing is using. If you delete it and do a manual brake conversion, your brake pedal feel will be exactly the same every single time, regardless of the condition you're driving in. So whether you're full throttle or idling, your brakes are going to feel exactly the same. And the more consistent you can make all of your inputs, the better your driving is going to be. Especially in drifting where we're doing a lot of left foot braking, so one foot's on the throttle, the other foot's on the brake. Your left foot isn't super used to doing that unless you do it for years and years and years. So it can become even more inconsistent because your foot's not used to it, and then brake pedal's not the same every time based off of vacuum input. Hopefully that made sense. You kind of understand why some people would want manual brakes. Now it is important to note, you can't just remove that, bolt a normal master cylinder up and call it a day, because the axis point that your brake pedal attaches to the master cylinder is made for boosted brakes. So if you remove the booster and keep that point at the same, it means your pedal is going to be really heavy, like it's going to take excessive force to push down, and we don't want that. We still want a normal feeling brake pedal, we just want a really consistent brake pedal.
This is Chase Bay's dual piston brake booster delete with a bolt-on 6:1 pedal ratio. It includes their 1-inch bore ultra compact master cylinder, reservoir, brake proportioning valve, fancy stainless steel AN fittings, and a few other goodies.
So now you know what it is and why we're going to do it. Let's actually do it. Before we can put any of those shiny new parts in the car, I had to take everything apart, which means removing the old master cylinder that you saw on the ground over there. With the booster, you have to pull it off the pedal, all of that fun stuff, and remove all the lines. I'm going to be rebuilding the lines from scratch. Chase Base does sell a line kit if you want to just get that. Or if you're really creative, you may be able to reuse some of your factory lines. It is also worth mentioning that the kit I got is non-ABS. It's another reason I'll be remaking my own lines, is because I don't have an ABS module and the factory lines do route through that. Now I deleted my ABS module and added a proportioning valve to the stock boosted setup, and it did work. It got me by. This is just the next step up from that. But if you have a totally stock car with the ABS module and everything, you're better off just buying a line kit or making your lines from scratch. But that is something to consider, because I believe they sell a manual brake conversion for with and without ABS. I went without it because you don't want ABS in a drift car. So as you can see, everything is removed. I kind of went a few too many steps ahead here, but we've got a nice looking engine bay now with everything cut out. And you'll notice that little Sharpie mark there. Let me show you why that's there, because it is a piece we're gonna have to cut out. So because this fancy thing changes our pedal ratio, it also changes where the master cylinder pokes through the firewall to achieve that pedal ratio, which means we need to trim the firewall. So I've just got it resting in there, and if we peek on the backside, you can see that little silver part is the master cylinder here and where it's trying to poke through the firewall. So like I said, we already marked it with a Sharpie, but I wanted to show you guys that's why we have to trim this, because the master cylinder sticks through at a different location so it can change the pedal ratio. With it marked in Sharpie, you can tell it's really not that much. So let's get a small cutoff disc on a Dremel or something like that and cut that little bit out so we can bolt this thing in. If you want more specific instruction on exactly how to cut out the firewall and a few other tips and tricks, Chase Base has a pretty good tutorial. But if you're handy with a cutoff wheel, do exactly that. Just hold it up, mark it, cut it, call it a day. But if you have more questions, check out their site. I just want to get this thing bolted in so we can start making some brake lines and actually start making some real progress here, because that is the time-consuming stuff. Little bit of precision cutting later. Don't mind the, just don't look over there. That was not me. But this looks good. Let's get the master in.
stainless steel. So to do this, we have to do a 47 degree, I believe, or 37 degree, because these are AN fittings. Single flare with T-nuts. I don't think they're called T-nuts. Some sort of nut. 37 degrees, stainless steel, AN fitting.
So this line he just made comes off of the lower half because it is the rear brake. So this line follows the firewall, jumps down here, and then it goes to the T. This is the T we made when we actually deleted the ABS and everything, and that is the rear brakes. So that's the rear brakes done, checked off the list.
Fast forward a little bit and the brake lines are done. They turned out awesome. Now keep in mind, I don't have any of them clamped down. Once the engine's in and I can fine tune the placement of all these, I'll put like rubber P clamps or something and kind of hold them in place. But overall, super happy with how they turned out. Like Nate was saying, something to be mindful of, this kit uses AN fittings instead of like normal brake line fittings. So if you are making your own brake lines, make sure you order the correct fittings. You'll need 3, and you need a tube nut and the AN fitting, so you end up with this. That's what we're looking at there. Got our proportioning valve to the rear. These are the 2 fronts. Like I said, we'll clean this up and clamp it down right in there. But I didn't want to clamp this in a certain spot because I'm not exactly sure where the headers are going to be, and I want to make sure this is far away from that. But overall, really happy with how they turned out. This is where the factory brake lines come through anyways. So pumped on that. This kit is super cool. Can't wait to actually drive the car with it. All right, so the master's bolted up. All the brake lines are made. But we're not quite done yet because we still have to attach the master to the pedal. And if you remember in the beginning of the video, I talked about pedal ratio and where the rod from the master comes in on the car and how that affects the pedal feel. Well, Chase Bays thought of that. Of course, we had to cut the firewall to kind of move that whole thing up. And they provide this funky looking mechanism that makes the pedal feel relatively factory, right? It doesn't make it super heavy, because like I said, if you had just removed the booster, your pedal would be way too heavy, the brakes would feel terrible, and we don't want that, which is where this little part comes in. So this fancy looking thing, this part goes into the master, and it will push back on the pedal on this little access thing. And what this does is gives you a different ratio because it is offset. It's not being pushed in a direct line, it's being pushed below that. And that should give us a relatively factory pedal feel, all while converting to manual brakes. So let's do my favorite thing and climb up under the dash. Well, lack of dash, because there's not one in here right now. And get this all hooked up. All right, I spent a little too long under there trying to figure it out, and it just was not working. So I ended up pulling the whole brake pedal out, and I think that's the easiest thing to do, because it's really hard to get this whole mechanism in there while you're underneath there, because it barely fits. Let's set this down and take a closer look. So essentially what this does is it moves the pickup point off the pedal up, right? So this is the factory one where this little stud is at. And now the Chase Bays kit moves it up here. As you can see, this is the rod that goes into the master cylinder. So now it is quite a bit further up, which changes the access point on the pedal, giving you a different point of leverage, which will change the pedal feel, and that's what's going to make it feel kind of factory. But this bolts on the bottom part, and then here's the top part that is held in with this clip, kind of like factory style. It's so hard to get this in there when it's on the car, because that's how much room you have to deal with. So pull your pedal out. It should already be unbolted since you had the master cylinder out anyways. Yank it out, put this little bracket on, and now we can toss it back in the car, and it should all line up.
All right, this is kind of awkward to film, but hopefully you can see that. That's that bolt-on plate. This is the side of it. And it's all hooked up. Works just as it should.
And that is the Chase Bays manual brake conversion installed. Super happy with how it turned out. I cannot wait to feel this thing on track. Overall, I would say the install was not that hard. It's pretty straightforward. It gets a little tricky if you're gonna make your own brake lines like I did. I really wanted stainless steel hard lines because I think they look cool. And big thanks to Nate, he was the one who did pretty much all the brake lines with this new setup. He's got a really nice flaring tool and more experience than I do, so thanks Nate.
other than just kind of messing with that little bracket underneath there where it attaches to the pedal. All pretty straightforward. All that's left to do now is hook up the lines to the actual brakes and then spend a little while bleeding this thing, and we'll be good to go. I'm not gonna bore you with bleeding brakes. I'm sure you guys know how to do that. So that's gonna be a wrap on this one. Let me know what you think down below. Give this video a thumbs up. And we still have a ton of work to do, so make sure you're subscribed because this build is gonna be moving quickly. We now have right at a month to get this thing done. So I'm gonna stop talking and get back to work. I'll catch you guys in the next one.